and
I saw a
predates
reel.
that.
A guy
Yeah.
was talking about, it's like, well, do you want to just live with me forever? And like, well, should we tell the government about it? I guess, yeah. So a lot of people say, okay, yeah, it's more than a contract. It's more than just that piece of paper. They get that. But it's also more than an emotional bond.
Sure,
too.
it's more than just a commitment as well. You may be one choice away from a thriving marriage. Welcome to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast with Bryon and Jennifer Harvey. All right, welcome to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast, and we are so happy today to be celebrating the 99th podcast episode today, which is all kinds of fun. So, of course, you know, Bryon, I'm going to 99 red balloons going by, Prince party like it's 1999. This is fabulous.
Be glad you weren't in the studio with us, audience, because it's been interesting and ubiquitous.
Right. So, yeah. And of course, I think I can sing both of those songs even if I can't. But that's just kind of fun for the 99s.
But
okay.
It's one of those, Jen just thinks in song lyrics consistently. So every episode, it's like, okay, what is the song that this is sparked in Jen's head this time, as you guys know? And this time, episode 99 is all these random 99 references.
That's exactly it. So I know today's episode you've titled, Bryon, as Marriage as Public Theology. So let's talk a little bit more about that and how you came up with that title, kind of reflecting the podcast today.
So yeah, you guys know I am a Bible theology nerd, and so you're stuck nerding out with me again, sweetheart. You guys get to listen, or you can listen to the next episode or the previous episode if you don't want to nerd out with me. But Jen is stuck here in the studio with me. But yeah, the reality is, though, a lot of times we misunderstand what marriage is, and we've talked about this in different ways on the podcast before, how marriage gets minimized and misunderstood because there is the reality of the civil legal aspect of marriage in most countries, certainly in the United States, and most of our listeners in the countries that you guys listen to, there is some sort of legal connection and oftentimes providing tax or other legal benefits or recognition. For instance, in the United States, married couples, when you're married, you can be on your spouse's health insurance if they have health insurance through their employer, filing tax and things like that. So there is that reality of the legal agreement, but marriage is much bigger and much more than merely a contract.
Oh, sure. And in you guys know I'm an attorney, and I talk about some of this and address this sometimes. I mean, of course, there's legal benefits that can attach to the marriage relationship, such as if your spouse passes away, you have certain legal rights as a surviving spouse, which we don't have to get into on the podcast itself. But just the idea of the government eventually, recognizing, or government should be recognizing marriage as an institution. Marriage did come first, but before the government started to recognize it. It's
before
funny.
Government, if you read scripture. I mean, there's a
Sure.
marriage before there's even human government in existence.
Oh, sure, absolutely. But what's interesting is I recently saw a meme that just kind of made me laugh looking at this podcast episode, because it said something like, marriage is this creepy thing because it's like, hey, government, I want you to get involved into my relationship and make it, permanent, right? But as we know, it's something that transcends and predates
I saw a reel.
that.
Yeah. I was talking about, it's like, well, do you want to just live with me forever? And like, well, should we tell the government about it? I guess, yeah. So a lot of people say, okay, yeah, it's more than a contract. It's more than just that piece of paper. They get that. But it's also more than an emotional bond.
Sure,
too.
it's more than just a commitment as well.
Yeah, it's more than a commitment. It's more than this, well, I love you and I want to be with you. This is true. I do love you and I want to be with you forever. But there's more to marriage when you read scripture and theology. And what's interesting is, to an extent, all theology is public theology, because how you live as a Christian is displayed in everything you do. If Jesus really is king, if Jesus really is Lord, then everything you do in life should reflect that. But marriage is really a specific aspect of theology and really reveals something specific about God. For instance, from the beginning, marriage was God's idea, not society's solution. It wasn't like early in prehistory or early on in the experience of humanity that's like, hey, we need to come up with a legal institution that verifies that children are legitimate and have rights to the sheep and the house, or that the sexual relationship between this man and this woman is legitimate and any other sexual relationships are illegitimate. It was long before that, God created this idea in the beginning of Genesis that humans would have this relationship.
Absolutely, and that's something that is really important to reflect, because marriage was God's idea as opposed to being a solution by society there. And if we end up reducing that to some sort of a function of society or these feelings, we're missing that deeper spiritual solution or purpose that God had for it.
Yeah, and Jesus talks about this, about it being a divine joining, not meant to be redefined or divided. And also, it's important to note that marriage isn't just companionship. It's not just, hey, I like being with you for stability or society, even though those are true. And healthy marriages are the foundation for healthy families, which are the healthy foundation for healthy society. But it's more because it reveals something about God. So modern culture often treats marriage as, one, a social construct. It's like, okay, it came out of, this is part of society. A legal agreement, it's like, hey, we've got this contract we signed in front of witnesses, or a tool for personal fulfillment. And I think that's probably the biggest one is, okay, I get married because I want to be happy. I want something. And that's a lot of the way society tends to present marriage as what it is.
It's all selfish and just more superficial.
Yeah, I think superficial, I think, is really a good way to look at it. I don't think it's always necessarily selfish. I think there is a lot of selfishness, but I think the social construct or the legal agreement isn't necessarily selfish. It's just very superficial. It's something that is done to you, not done in you.
Mm-hmm.
And even Christians unintentionally will shrink marriage into these concepts.
Mm-hmm. So like a private relationship that has a private impact, which, of course, your marriage is going to spill over into all aspects of your life as you're reflecting Christ and his purpose and being united to your spouse. And also Christians can shrink things into being, intentionally or not intentionally, that personal preference rather than a public witness.
Yeah, stay out of my life, stay out of my marriage, and even unfortunately, hey, church, stay out. This is just between us, and there definitely is things that are private in marriage, but marriage is public. I mean, the fact that you're bonded to each other, that you have no other sexual partners, that you have a family, that you're raising children together, that you're combining finances and bills and things like that. There's things about marriage that just out of necessity are public, and how you live that marriage then is out of necessity going to be informed and controlled by your theology.
And also, I mean, how many times have we seen sad situations where, you might not know a couple very well, but they attend your church, and then all of a sudden they're not there any longer, and then you hear that they've divorced.
Right.
And, that it's just tough, because I look at that with us, of course, in marriage ministry, just saying, goodness, not that you, Bryon, or myself are anybody better than any other married couple, but just the idea of, wow, I wish that we as a church body, including you and myself participating, I wish we knew what was going on and could have helped this couple through a difficult patch so that they wouldn't have divorced.
Yeah, absolutely. How could we as the church have come alongside and as a family and as the body been able to help heal and support that part of the body? That's the kind of the construct, the social construct. But it's just as bad to reduce marriage as a function or a feeling. We miss out on a lot when we think of marriage as just about
the legal agreement,
legal, but also if we take that aside and say, oh, it's just about the feels, that's no good either. It's not, you can't replace the legal agreement with touchy-feely, or it's just,
sure,
it's this emotional connection.
Absolutely, because it can just create confusion, because, of course, I think it begs the question of, why does marriage matter so much then, and why does the Bible speak of it with such weight and permanence.
Yeah, if it's just between us, it's just how we feel about each other, then why is this such a big deal to God?
Oh, sure. I think it comes down to the core issue of we can forget that marriage is rooted in the imago Dei, that is the image of God.
Absolutely. That's part of being human and part of being that creation.
Because marriage is that living reflection of the triune God. And to talk about this best is really talking about understanding what God's nature is. God has never been lonely because God has never been alone.
I think that, to me,
Yeah.
that's important. That's striking, right? Because we were talking about this recently where loneliness has been considered an epidemic by one Surgeon General. And we were talking recently about relationships and how when you're married and parents, it's harder to have friends and stuff outside the home. We were reading that article.
And even talked about that, not just in America, but I know in England, they appointed, I would say within the last decade or so, a minister of loneliness. In other words, to somebody in the UK appointed by the government to deal with the epidemic of loneliness in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, because it affects us so much. And so I think it's hard really to imagine, especially when think of God, right? And God being separate and other and being completely unique from anything else because everything else is created. Yet, because God is a Trinity, God has never experienced loneliness.
Right. And of course, I'm thinking of the song, One is the Loneliest Number. We all know that there's only one God, but God being triune in that Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Yeah, I think Jesus was able to experience something new and different on the cross of loneliness, but it was different from like human loneliness of being alone. It was more of that, oh my gosh, I've never been emotionally, relationally separate before like he was on the cross when he was bearing sin. So, but yeah.
And again, can't even imagine that, but that's what happened.
Completely foreign to our ability to experience. But at the end, God has never really been alone because he's eternally existed as three distinct persons, fully united in perfect love.
And that's that unity, humility, submission, and equality all existing within God himself as that triune God.
Yeah, even God submitting to the persons of the Godhead, submitting to each other because they have different roles and responsibilities in how God rules creation. In marriage, what I think is beautiful about this, and I love when I get to officiate weddings, this is the sermon part, as you know, sweetheart, from attending weddings that I've done. This is the sermon I like to give at marriage, is to encourage couples to understand that they're entering a relationship that is as close to experiencing what it's like to be the Trinity as humanly possible. Two people becoming one couple, united in a way that we can't fully grasp with just our five senses. There's a spiritual component to that union when that happens.
Just the whole God is three persons, but one God. Marriage is two people, yet one union in marriage there. And the Trinity being held together by the mutual unfailing love. The marriage is held together by mutual self-giving love. And Christian marriage, of course, is designed to reflect, well, imperfectly, right, but faithfully, the relational nature of God. And it's funny because I love this type of sermon, and I was just thinking of, we had been to one wedding where it was basically, I felt like the pastor was saying, people are awful, you sure you still want to get married? Right?
Yeah, that's not necessarily the most encouraging. I mean, I understand it's like, hey, marriage is simple, but it's not easy.
Sure,
right?
But at that wedding, neither the bride or groom walked, and they're still married, so all good.
Success.
Right. Even if the sermon wasn't a success, I think that they've done well.
Yeah, but see, and that's the thing. When you look at Genesis, when you look at the creation story and look at the idea of humans being put in the garden, their purpose is to reflect God to the world and to reflect the praises of the world back to God. And so that's why humans exist, is to represent God and reflect him to the world. And imperfectly, marriage does that as well. It shows something of God and how we interact with each other as a married couple. Spouses communicating and just living our lives shows something. I mean, Jesus said himself that we would recognize his followers by how we love each other. In John 13:35, it's not theology, it's not politics, it's not how often you go to church or read your Bible or your doctrine. I mean, none of those things are indicators really of what it looks like to follow Jesus. All those things are important, right? But
Sure.
at the end of the day, other faiths have doctrine and theology and things like that and live that. But it's how we love one another is really how Jesus said the world would know we're his disciples. And I think that is magnified in marriage because people see you interact so much because you're so often together and identified with each other.
And in marriage, love becomes visible through the words that we speak to each other, from our tone, from our posture towards our spouse and about our spouse, and also nonverbal communication. It's showing that love through service to each other and mutual honor of each other, and also how spouses speak about each other and attitudes about each other when the other spouse is absent.
And that works in both directions, right? Because when couples are loving each other well, the people around them see that. They see the interactions of a couple in positive, the holding hands when they're walking through the store, whatever, when they're walking into church, the public displays of affection. And yes, PDA is perfectly okay when you're married as long as it's not overly intimate. Those things display God. But when people see couples arguing in unhealthy ways, not necessarily arguing, it's okay to argue, but it's an unhealthy when it's the gotcha type stuff. That communicates to the audience something about God, and that communicates theology as well. And so that's something we need to keep in mind as Christian couples, not to say that we're going to be perfect because we're going to fail and sin is still real, but we should be at least aware of how our marriage tells our children, our church community, our neighbors, the people we work with. What about God? If you're trying to share Jesus with a coworker, yet you were just bashing your spouse, how effective is that really, and how well are you representing Jesus? I was like, yeah, I think it's important that you know who this Jesus is, and this Jesus that I know and love apparently is okay with me speaking ill of my spouse.
That's not how that works.
That's communicating the wrong thing.
That's very true, and I think that with a lot of this, you want to make sure that you're with your spouse growing in character together and having these be legitimate fruits of that character and positive attitudes with your spouse. We, of course, don't want to just be performative. We don't want it to look like things are good on the outside, but it's a big train wreck on the inside.
Whitewashed tombs.
That's exactly it.
Absolutely.
We don't want that, but we want this to come out of a clear and an honest heart about how we're treating our spouse and having a positive attitude about our spouse and interacting with our spouse there. And, I think it's always important, too, that we do have, love that is in practice just in everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think an example of that, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, so if you're a frequent listener, you've heard this story, but really that story about when we were buying the house and you were talking with the real estate agent and how you made the decision to consult with me before signing documents or signing off saying, yes, we're going to do this. And it was all legal stuff.
Oh, sure. And again, I'm the attorney in the couple, so kind of in my wheelhouse, to say the least.
You're way smarter than me. It's okay. You can be honest with our audience and tell them that.
Well, I mean, again, we all have our own areas of expertise, whatever spouse we are there. But it was just something where it's like, yeah, you've got a lawyer who's in the marriage, so this is definitely something you want to look at having that spouse take a really good look at the contract. But I was just like, you know what? It's like realtor, title company, we're going to pull the trigger on that. That's my expectation, but I want to take this back to my husband to just, make sure that he's cool with this. And he didn't have any questions that he wanted me to, talk through, or he didn't want to say, hey, Jen, what do you think of this thing? Did you consider this aspect of it? Even though Bryan's not the attorney, I just want to be honoring of my husband in that.
Well, and not only was there nothing legally requiring that, it's not like you had to talk to me because we were going to sign later, and even though we're married, there was nothing really relationally. It's not like I had told you, don't sign anything without consulting me.
Oh, sure. And right. I mean, you were busy at work. I mean, you had all kinds of things that were going on and didn't have time to stop off at this office with me.
Right. So there was nothing binding you to that decision. There wasn't a legal obligation. There wasn't even like a relational obligation from me saying, this is what I want. It was purely you saying, I love my husband and I want to make sure we're in sync on this.
Oh, sure, absolutely, and I think that what's cool about that. And again, I've made mistakes in other areas, and we can tell you, and I think we have told you stories of that. But just in this example that we're sharing, it was really cool. I thought that unity of us together as a couple, and then me choosing to honor Bryan in this, it just became visible to the title company. It became visible to the realtor, and the title company contact there. It said to me, hey, if you're looking out for your husband like this, I know you're going to be looking out for your clients, so I'm going to send you referrals for clients that would need an outside attorney to review documents. So it ended up manifesting as a really cool lead for me for more referrals coming into my business.
And that was a knockoff effect of being loving and representing God well.
Sure.
And that's not, God doesn't always work that way for us, but God often will work in such ways. And because people, when they see godliness, people naturally want to be around godliness. They don't want to get too close sometimes because it reveals their own sin, but people tend to want to be around godliness because they're drawn to God in the believer. Mm-hmm. And so there's that kind of that push-pull, right? Where it's like often until they come to accept Christ and their understand their sin is forgiven, they may not want to get too close because it's too revealing. But at the same time, people like being around godliness because we're created for that. We're created to want that. And that's a big thing about marriage, because marriage is never just personal. It's never just between the two of you. Yes, it's a personal relationship, but marriage is always formative, always revealing you and revealing what you believe about God. Whether you're an atheist or whatever, it reveals what you believe about God and how you interact. And every marriage tells a story about God. And our goal as Christians in marriage is not being happy in front of people. It's being holy. It's not, will people see God in our marriage? It's what God do people see when they watch us and how we love each other, how we communicate. It's not just two people united. It shows the world what kind of God we believe in.
Well, thanks for joining us for this 99th podcast episode for Operation Thriving Marriage. Tell a friend if this will speak to them, and please come back, and we'll be happy to have you join us for the 100th and other podcast episodes.
Next episode, 100th episode. We're excited. We're going to do something a little different. I feel like we should have like air horns or something. Maybe Todd can add that in post. Something going on about the exciting 100th episode. Please come back in 2 weeks and listen to that one. We're excited for what we're going to be doing there.
Jen and I started Operation Thriving Marriage to help couples and churches take marriages from merely surviving to thriving. We've got our book, we've got a blog, and resources for our coaching ministry, and you can bring us out for an Operation Thriving Marriage experience. For more information, go to OperationThrivingMarriage.com. That's OperationThrivingMarriage.com.